Hi there, I'm Francesca Amelia and welcome to Coincidental Cats with Louis Wain and Crowley. So when I just made the decision to become an antiques dealer and I'd rented my very first unit at the Emporium where I sell now, I was down on the south coast at my dad's house and I went on my very first buying trip. I was nervous, I'd never spent money to make money before, I didn't know how much risk to take. It was a daunting prospect, but it was exciting. It was at a local antique shop, which is this little Aladdin's Cave, and I did find some real gems. But at the back, in this really dusty glass cabinet, I found this. And yes, it's a scraggy bit of paper, which has been glued onto cardboard and then cut out from possibly a piece of luggage or a folder, but it's a cat with a monocle smoking a pipe. So I had to have it. And I went to the antiques dealer and I asked him how much it was because there was no price on it. And he just looked confused. He said he'd never seen it before. He didn't think he'd ever brought it into the shop. He didn't know a price because he hadn't bought it. And that made me think, obviously, it had been put there for me by the fairies and he had to come home with me. So the guy gave it to me for literally nothing as part of a lot. And when I got home, I was doing some research of the other bits and pieces. I got to this, and as you can see from the very easily readable signature, it says Louis Wain. So quick Google, really interesting life. So I start regaling his story to everybody around me that will listen. And my husband picks it up and he's looking at it, studying it, and he's adamant that this is a real drawing. At the time, I didn't have the tricks that I do now, the simple things to be able to tell, like on a base level, if something is a print or a drawing. I didn't know. I was just starting out, so I couldn't fully disagree with him. I was adamant that it was a print. So we went back and forth. I understood where he was coming from. I mean, the lines are very sketchy, that's the right word. It does look like it could be a real drawing. I said, you know, it's obviously from a magazine, millions of magazines, millions of copies of prints, and he was adamant that why would someone save it if it wasn't real? And I said, well, why wouldn't someone protect it? And I was like, well, actually, it could be a fake, but it could still be a real drawing. And so in the end, we agreed to disagree. Because compromise always wins. And we went about our day. I did some more research. He went to sit down later to watch some telly, and I just hear babe, you've got to come see this. And I went into the living room. I turned on the telly, and the first film that had come up on Amazon Prime was The Electrical Life of Louis Wain. It had just been released that day. Never heard of it before, and it wasn't the algorithm, it wasn't because we've been talking about it, it was literally Prime's latest video that they just released, #1 in videos. So that was, to me, I looked at my husband, it's a sign, it's a sign. Believe in signs, it was a sign that I was on my path, the correct journey. And so the other, even more coincidental thing was Louis Wain was being played by Benedict Cumberbatch, but his wife was being portrayed by the actress Claire Foy, who I just happened to go to school with and was in the same form as throughout high school. So it just felt like this really weird little coincidental bubble that was like telling me that my path was on and that this little cat of mine was something special. So we watched the movie and I would highly recommend it. And I was the annoying person going, I just told you that, I just told you that, I knew that, the whole way through. But I wanted to just share a little bit about Louis Wain's story and legacy, and also at the end I will let you know if this is a real drawing or if it is a print. Louis Wain's story is not a particularly happy one, but I think it's a really important one, because not only did he go on to become one of the most successful commercial illustrators in the history of England, he also changed how we see cats today. Before then, they were treated with contempt, they were strays, they weren't domesticated in the same way now. They weren't dressed up as hot dogs and thrown birthday parties. So obviously he made the world a better place. And his birth was in 1860. He had a slightly traumatic childhood and then went on to become a freelance artist. His first pictures were published in 1881. And he was concentrating on countryside scenes and animals, but everything was about to change. So when he was 23, he married one of his 5 sisters' governesses, and her name was Emily Richardson, and she was 10 years his senior. So at the time, this was scandal, and the pair moved out together. They very shortly afterwards, so sadly, Emily was diagnosed with breast cancer. She became very unwell. And at the same time, one rainy night, they heard a meowing. And it was a small, stray, black and white kitten in the rain who they brought in and rescued and called Peter. Now, like I say, this was very unusual at the time. And Peter was a great comfort to Emily, who, when she was sick, he would look after her. And Louis, who just constantly wanted to make sure, Emily was happy, would endlessly sketch pictures of Peter, to cheer her up. And she loved them so much that she encouraged him to get them published. And he did. And this led to him being commissioned to create a Christmas illustration, which was called The Kitten's Christmas Party. And this features 150 different cats, a lot of who look like Peter, all doing Christmassy things. And it was really successful. And it was received very well, and this led on to much more work. However, unfortunately, very soon afterwards, Emily passed away. Louis slipped into depression. Obviously, it was said to be never the same again. And while this was happening, cats became an obsession to him, and he started drawing them in all different kinds of situations, and they were becoming much more anthropomorphized. Human-like, with human expression and features, and such as my guy who was smoking his pipe with his monocle. And here's some examples. These type of images were extremely popular during the Victorian time, and these illustrations would have been seen everywhere on prints, on greeting cards, in cartoons, and they featured topical trends of the time. So Louis himself said that he would take a sketchbook and go to a restaurant or a similar type of location and look at the people around him and turn them into cats on the page. And I think that is amazing. It takes people watching to a whole new level. I'm totally going to try it. And that's what led to the sort of the humour and the realism that showed through his images. But while he was incredibly successful, our Louis was not a good businessman. He was exploited. He was trying to care for a large family, and he didn't have any business sense. He made bad financial decisions, and he struggled throughout most of his life. And unfortunately, his mental health was also in decline. There's a lot of theories on this, which I am not going to go into, but he did end up in 1924 in a mental hospital and was in institutional care for 15 years before he died. But he was moved around. He was actually moved to better places by people stepping in and giving money because they respected him so much. So he did end up in a place with a garden and a colony of cats. And he kept drawing at this whole time, and his style really evolved. And now we're talking bright colours, patterns, psychedelic, and here's a few examples. I think these designs are fascinating, and it's important to know that they were a huge influence on the 60s psychedelic art movement. Throughout his career, Louis Wain was creating 600 new designs every year. That's 1,500 cats every year. Cat army. And he produced over 200 books. He had 16 different annuals, and he was the leading authority on all things cat. He was literally the president of the National Cat Club. He judged cat competitions. He was a member of numerous cat charities, and he changed the face of he paved the way for the crazy cat ladies of today to exist. And I'm sure he would have loved our cat celebrity community as it is today. So even the very famous author H.G. Wells said that Louis Wain made the cat his own. He created a cat society, a cat world, and that any British cat not living or looking like a Louis Wain cat would be ashamed of itself, which is why I'm very happy to report that my cats Dave, Lister and Crowley are very much living their best Louis Wain lives. So that was a little bit about Louis, and now back to my picture. and whether it is a real drawing or if it is a print. So it's a really simple test. All you need to do is take a loupe or a magnifying glass and look closely at the picture. And if you see pixels or pixelation, it's a method of the printing, and that means it's definitely a print. So I've tried to take a photo of what I can see through my loupe. And if you can see those little dots, you can definitely recognise that this is a print. So I get to tell my husband that I'm right, which is always a bonus. I'm sure he would disagree. But I'm keeping him now. He's not going anywhere. He's a reminder of the beginning of my journey and that first initial sign that I was kind of on the right path. So he's a keeper. But since then, obviously, coincidentally, lots of Louis Wain has popped up, and I managed to buy a Louis Wain at auction and sell it. And then I have also bought another Louis Wain at auction, which has become what I call a sale fail, which is when I buy something to sell and end up keeping it. And that is because he is a pirate cat. He has a patch. And so he truly belongs with my model ship collection and my pirate finalia. So yeah, he's a keeper too. So that has been Coincidental Cats with Louis Wain. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you do, please let me know in the comments, and I'd love to know about your cats. And if you did enjoy, please hit that subscribe button, and I really hope you stick around for future content. Excuse me. I think we need to do some video, hey? You want to do video? This is Dave. Hey? He welcomes you to Coincidental Cats too. This is not your video, buddy. This is not one for the dogs. We'll do dogs next time, shall we? I'm sorry, buddy. Or one for the cats.